One of my favorite matches to talk about is actually when I was grappling against Glayton Mello. And this was at one of the Toro Cup matches I did years ago. And the thing is, Glayton isn't a bad guy. I'm not going to vilify him. He was just my opponent for a day. But in that moment, you would think that I had done some kind of like evil deed against the citizens of the Raleigh-Durham Triangle area of North Carolina. Because I go down to this event thinking I'm just going to put on a show for a nice charity event and do some jiu-jitsu and highlight, some fun. So I prepped for this guy as best as I could, and I trained, and I showed up thinking I was going to have a match with just this one guy. My, at the time, blue belt girlfriend is there to video on my iPhone, and that's about it. That's my coaching. Her videoing silently in the corner. Meanwhile, Glayton Mello had what I would consider the 2007 offensive coaching staff to the New England Patriots. It was like 5 or 6 black belts all coaching him. And not only that, but one of them is my good friend Cody Malte. And he's calling out like my signature moves by name before I do them with the appropriate counter moves to stop them. I'm like, oh my God, they really prepared for me. To the point where certain coaches were looking for certain things and calling those out to Glayton, and the other coaches were looking for other things to call out to him. So I have to beat like 6 people at the same time. And the match ends up it goes to decision because we didn't have a submission. And he wins on points. Now, during the point round, one of my friends who happened to be in the crowd was saying, if you just do this one thing, you can tie the match. And in my mind, I'm like, I'd rather lose and take this bitter defeat of he got ahead of me in position and got these points, because that'll make my training after this better. But if I take the shortcut now of just arbitrarily doing a thing to tie it, I'm going to have to go home knowing I'm a coward who just did enough to make it not a loss. That's not the same as actively winning. Like my brain doesn't work that way. If you told me, Dave, if you do this, you can win, I'd be like, oh, okay, I'll do that. But if you like do this and you can not lose and force a tie, that seems to me like the coward's way out, because the real learning is going to occur from the sting of defeat. I've had one tie in my whole career, and not for nothing, but the guy I tied with is a really good friend of mine, and I took the match on short notice, and we were up in New York, and I didn't know that at the end of the time limit, if there was no sub, that it would just go to that. But it was like, okay, we can do it this way, but is that a way that fans want to see a match? Like both people getting their hands raised? I feel like if it can be anything other than a loss, it takes away from the contract we made as competitors saying, I'm coming out and I understand there has to be a winner. There has to be a loser. That's the one match I wish I could take back, because although I have one victory I wish I could overturn to a loss, and I have a few losses I wish I could overturn to victories, that tie is the one that is the worst to me. Just like, give me the L. Like make me look at it with really, really scrutinizing eyes so that I can learn from my mistakes. But if you're telling me it was good enough, I might not change anything. And I think the worst thing that we can be is complacent.
It's like the quote, good decisions come from experience. Experience comes from making bad decisions.
Heck yeah. I loved the scene at the start of Infinity War for Marvel when Loki goes up to Thanos and he's like, I have experience. And Thanos is like, if you call losing experience, and he's like, I call experience. And it's like, yeah, he's right. He's right. But this is kind of like why I smile when I'm grappling with somebody who's never grappled with me before. And they might sense that I'm being standoffish. And it's not that I'm being standoffish. It's more that if I've never grappled you before and I don't know who you are and I don't think you have a certain set of skills to really like threaten me, I'm going to let you get the first move. And the reason I'm going to let you get the first move is because if I have a huge skill gap over the person I'm grappling, do you really just want to get smashed for the whole time limit? So I might as well let you get your first thing, and maybe it forces me to fight from a deficit, and that would be great. But when I see people who are trying to do a thing and then they see me not doing a thing, they're like, "Oh, but what do I do? You're not doing anything." And it's like, bro, I'm trying to let you get in this game. What are you going to do? Surprise me? Like, show me a thing I haven't seen yet. At this point, my exposure to the game is so good that there's maybe 5% of all jiu-jitsu out there that I'm just not familiar with. And that is so much better than the average competitor who only learns, I would say, about 80% of what's out there, because fighters don't have a rank, they have a time. Your time is roughly between 18 and 29. That's when you can compete at your best. Megaton Diaz, I get it. He's like 57 now or going on 58. He's still competing regularly, and he's like the only coral belt who actively competes. And I want to be Megaton Diaz. I want to show longevity. But most competitors don't have the deepest of understandings of the whole jiu-jitsu game. They know their game really well. They know the seasonal game that the other athletes are playing, and I'll get into that more in a second. And they know the rules well enough so that now is the time. Will these athletes someday make great instructors? Maybe. But not all that can do can teach. In the same way that some of these head coaches of these prominent teams, they themselves don't have world titles to their names, but they can tell you how to get to a world title because they're great coaches, and they can't physically keep up with these young athletes, but they can make those young athletes get onto the podium. For me, I want to make it a point of I can win at this time and at future times fairly easy on the backbone of my work ethic. And I understand that I expose myself to as much jiu-jitsu that's out there as possible so that when my students come up to me, I can answer their questions, or at least direct them to a source that can answer their question. And if it's about me competing, I'm not running into a bunch of things that I've never seen before. So getting that exposure is massive, and I want to make sure that I get it for the students as well by bringing in top talent as often as we can. If your school doesn't allow you to cross-train, or they don't bring in talent from outside of their affiliation association, then you're just a part of a cult. Open sourcing anything leads to the most exponential growth. It's when we sit on our decisions. It's when we sit on our decisions and we say, I'm not going to share this because I want this to only be with my people. That's a limited exposure and a limited pool. How are you going to get enough of a cross sample to know if it works or not? Take it across town. Try it at another gym. Go to another gym and see how they do a thing, because maybe they have a better method. Bring that back to your instructor and be like, hey, so they do it like this over there. What do you think? And if they just don't want to hear it, that person is a cult leader, right? If they're unwilling to listen, because we should be able to say, I don't have so big of an ego that I think my moves are the best. Maybe that other person had a better method. And it's okay for me to lose sleep at night thinking about how that person is better. That's okay. But it is not okay to let your students suffer because you have an ego as an instructor to not take better intel. You have to act with the second you see a better method. I've said this in the past. I don't love any one move enough to not ever change it. Like if I think a move is so good, I don't have to change it. You better start asking the right questions about where the real Dave is, because that is a body double. There isn't a single move I won't change if I find a better way of doing it.
So when you're both teaching and your own like personal mindset, going from what Jocko said, it's not what you preach, it's what you tolerate.
Correct. You have to. But it doesn't hurt that my stance and what I show, or to use his vernacular, preaching, what I say is about open-mindedness. I want people to have a very diverse portfolio. Um, in the health world, or at least in the nutrition side of things in the health industry, you would say eat from a variety of food sources, right? Because no one food source has everything the human body needs. No one instructor has everything that one student needs. And to think you have everything that your one student needs, probably the number one sign of a megalomaniac, egotistical something or another, right? Because unless you're a carbon copy of me, whatever I teach you isn't going to immediately translate. Just the dimensions of your shoulders, your torso, your hips, your flexibility, nagging injuries, anything you bring to the mats that makes you you is also what makes you not me. And so for me to teach you from a wide variety of moves is me saying, here's this cornucopia of martial arts. It is never ending, and there's a plentiful amount of stuff in there. You have to find the things that work best for you and the things that agree with you. But within the realm of individual effort in a sporting event, if you're trying to make it far and you want to have a professional feel to your endeavor, you have to train like a professional. And the sad thing is, most people want it, but they don't realize the sacrifices you have to make to your personal life in order to have a professional life somewhere else, not your main job. So if you're not me and this isn't your full-time gig and you're doing some other thing Monday through Friday, 9 to 5, and you're coming in even as a diehard, let's say you're doing 5 classes a week, you're never going to be a professional. You're not. You can do 5 classes a week, but if your 9 to 5 is something other than this, you are a rare breed who found the time to do multiple things in the day where you can have 8 hours doing one thing and maybe just live in the gym after you get off work. But a professional is somebody who lives and breathes every minute of the day the thing that they're trying to do. So Jordan Reed, one of my good friends and clients, used to be a professional footballer for a few different NFL teams. You know, for a short period of time, he was with the 49ers, but, you know, mostly he was with the Washington Commanders back when they were still the Redskins. And the thing about Jordan Reed was he's a guy that, you know, can run a lot of routes really well, but he had one specific route that was just like masterclass. Like when you see it, it's like all the other people in his position want to run it his way. To do that, he is working that one route hundreds of times a day, even though he had it mastered. But the idea of keeping something sharp and keeping it well tuned means you just don't let it ever develop rust. It never sits still and accumulates dust on it. And because he just couldn't allow himself a moment of respite to get rusty, it stayed sharp. Well, we have people that will ask me how to do an activity or how to do an action of some kind. I'll give them the answer. They'll drill it for a few minutes, and then I'll see them again days later, and they'll have a different question. And I'm like, okay, mental note, that person barely got the reps necessary to correct their last question, and they're asking me something else. Am I going to not answer this question and be like, you should go do that other thing? I want to so bad. But at the same time, if that person isn't a professional, I'm not going to treat them like a professional. You want to keep asking me the same, you know, like quick fix answers, and then you want to keep like shuffling your feet for years about how you're not actually fixing the problems. The answer was always there. It was just do that other thing until you actually fix it. But the problem is that takes so long, and people don't want to make those corrective exercises happen because it seems monotonous and boring. But you know what sucks more? Losing.